First, Kristian Simsarian is going to speak about the new undergraduate program in interaction design that he's helped organize and is now teaching in and running.
Yeah, that's the wrong talk. But I could try. That's my talk. Yeah, that's mine. That's mine. Oh, it's a little bleached out, but that's all right. It's actually wonderful to be back in this group and to see it thriving so well. In the last century, I actually did a lot of BayCHI stuff. And I think I learned a lot from this group and felt like BayCHI was my group because I come from a HCI and specifically CSCW background. And about the millennium, I started to discover this weird thing that I was very attracted by because in some large grants I was working on, they had design partners. And in that process, I started to chase after something that just seemed like it was more than a shiny object, and ended up at a company called IDEO, which I think a lot of you know, for the last 10 years, and almost 11. And while I was there, essentially was both on the interaction design team and what they called human factors. It's kind of got this legacy name to it, more the ethnography research group, and ended up founding or co-founding the software experiences group, which I co-led for about 4 or 5 years until we realized that software was becoming part of everything, and we kind of dissolved that into more of a horizontal, into everything IDEO does. And then this last year, which is the story I'm going to tell you, is we finally convinced CCA to do an interaction design program and sort of embrace the Silicon Valley of which it's part. In San Francisco, the creative capital, if you will, of the Silicon Valley. And that's the story I want to tell you. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I found about interaction design and show you a little bit of the student work from a pilot course we ran this spring. And the real course will be starting this fall. So with that, let's see, make sure I got this right. Yeah, that's working. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the next generation of designers, and it's really exciting. Just get rid of my phone and other bulky objects. It's really exciting because this group of people who are, actually I had people from 18 to 46 in my class, but especially the young folks, they've grown up with this stuff, and it's just been around them. So their sense for the kind of things we fought really hard for, the idea of user experience and multiple touch point kind of design, comes naturally, which has been kind of a big surprise. So let's see here. I'm going to lead with the video we created. We should have sound. You guys just indicate when we have sound up there. There we go. Turn it down a little bit.
What I love about CCA is that the community is so supportive.
There's such an abundance of creative people here.
You get to do a little bit of everything, and every day is kind of something new.
When CCA is introduced to something new and fun and interesting and very inspiring, like interaction design, they really embrace it.
Interaction design is a way of defining how things behave and how people interact with those objects.
How can you make that an intuitive process and something that's fun and beautiful?
It can be something as simple as touch or touching two things together.
Could be the TV,
video games,
A netbook,
mobile phones,
the sensor array in a forest. All of that is interaction design.
It's the interaction designer's job to make that stuff good, intuitive, easy to use, compelling, delightful. The interaction design program is a 4-year Bachelor of Fine Arts. We're involving the community, we're involving people from industry, we're involving professionals.
CCA is in a really unique position. It's in the right place, the right part of the world. It's where interaction design as a discipline got founded. It has access to amazing teaching talent.
You're going to find the people that are literally inventing the future as your teachers.
From the video game industry, from the movie industry, from the tech industry.
These are people who have
living, vibrant practices.
So many amazingly creative professors and so many creative people in the student body.
If I have a question at 2 in the morning and I email my teacher, I get a response by 7 a.m.
I think they really do care about their students.
I love teaching. I love bringing out people's passion and interests. And there's so much to explore.
CCA being in San Francisco, it couldn't be a more perfect storm.
The Bay Area is the center of interaction design. Companies like Google and Facebook and Apple and IBM and Intel and Microsoft, and the list goes on and on.
Being in San Francisco is very important to the whole CCA experience.
I've been meeting all my design heroes.
I feel like I'm building a sort of community base, a sort of network of connections.
Interaction design students graduate with a portfolio, training, and craftsmanship that companies are seeking.
I mean, somebody who's going to be great at interaction design is fascinated by technology, fascinated by the contemporary world that we live in, but at the same time they're fascinated by people.
Being a designer, it is in your ethos to do things that help.
You know, everything that we do, we're conscious of its effect on the planet.
The kind of person who's going to succeed here is the kind of person taking responsibility for the future of culture and people and planet.
This is the art of now. This is the future.
If you have the confidence to think that you might be able to play a role in inventing the future, this is the place for you.
So there's an interesting thing. We had to create that video actually before we created the curriculum. We knew, we had a sense of what it was going to be, and what I'm going to tell you a little bit is the story of creating the curriculum. Because there aren't very many undergraduate interaction design programs. That's usually a graduate, up till now, that's usually a graduate discipline. And actually right now, there are, I think I know of at least 5 new ones that are opening up in the next year or so, and another handful that are existing. So there's a little bit of trying to figure it out, and it felt like it's more than just a scaled down version of the graduate, that it's something different. So first I'd actually like to address this question just a little bit, because I think lots of people will use this and be talking about possibly different things. And what I found in communicating this especially, and in fact one of my biggest challenges, and I would like to call on all of you to help with this, is bringing the awareness of high school students and their parents and their teachers of this profession, because people don't know. It's a new profession. It's not in the ether. But the examples are everywhere. We're living in a world that certainly has more screens tomorrow than it does today, and they're abundant. And I purposely didn't put the computer screen in here because we all know that one, right? But everywhere else, these kind of interactive screens are appearing. And something dramatic is happening, and I'm just going to choose automotive as an example. The screens are appearing here, right? And they're replacing things that are traditionally analog, or at least traditionally dials. And this is a Ford Fusion that actually has kind of leaves that was design led, has leaves on it that grow bigger as your economy and your foot gets lighter on the gas pedal. And then they kind of wither and die when you go sort of peel out. And then, how many people know what this car is? Isn't this an amazing car? I mean, this is like the first car that I've really had cravings for in the last couple decades. Is anyone from Tesla here? Like, this is just, you know, it seems it's homegrown too, right? Isn't it hard to believe this is coming out of the Bay Area? It's a 4-door, really fast sedan. It's about $50,000. Now, interesting thing is the whole dashboard is a screen. There's a whole new canvas, right? What are you going to do with that? And here's, at least, you know, and I don't really want to make Tesla look bad or anything, but this is what was out in the net in terms of concept. And I'm sure this looks good for the press. I'm sorry it's more bleached out than it is on my screen. But there's like a Nirvana CD there. And you can see they're just actually replicating what was there, and it's all a touchscreen, right? And a lot of chrome and a lot of things. I think we don't quite know what to do, right? There's a lot of exploration to figure out how to do this right. And it's probably not just a replication of what was in the past. And then my favorite sort of no-screen example is Zipcar. You know, this is, so people say, you know, is interaction design just screens? And I say, well, I don't think it's that. I think it's, you know, it's a lot bigger than that. And screens and technology have certainly brought it to light, but it's actually designing experiences across multiple things. And are you giving me like the voice up louder, or no? Or you're just giving me, okay. Thanks. Okay. That, you know, Zipcar is, you're just giving me encouragement. I appreciate that. You know, a sort of no screen kind of way to access your rental car is really cool. People love this thing. And I put forward that this requires interaction design. And then I'm just going to pay a little homage, because I think, and being in the business I was for the last decade, this guy sort of changed everything, because it seemed like in 2003, 2004, every client was coming and saying, I want the iPod of toasters. We're going to redesign the toaster, and yeah, we want it to be an iPod. And, you know, and you sort of dig in that, and you slowly figure out what that means is successful, right? They didn't quite know why or anything. It's successful, and a successful toaster. And Apple has really proven that design can be, leading by design can be leading great business. And that actually leading with your offering is a fantastic way to put your company forward. And it's not easy, right? Like, a lot of hard decisions happen in that company to put this wonderful stuff out. And then, you know, actually leading the next generation of touch interfaces. I was working with a number of mobile companies at the same time. Everybody had the same components, of course, and I'm sure a lot of you know that. Everyone had access to the same touchscreens that were coming out, and were struggling with the legacy of the old 5-way and the cursor and the grid and everything else, and Apple sort of jumped it. And they also put this kind of thing into people's homes, you know, essentially into everyday life, where 5 years ago, this was a wild, crazy student concept. You know, like, I don't know how many times I saw something like this. Like, this screen is, you know, is going to show a window or a portal onto that screen, and it's going to be all like this. And it was like, it was relegated to research and crazy student concepts. This is now, you know, completely familiar and accessible to the average person. And if you don't know, this is Scrabble, and your rack sits on your iPhone, and if you do a little flicking gesture, the tile lands on the, if it's your turn, I assume, lands on the board. And of course, it doesn't matter if you flick that way or that way. It just, you know, you flicked it off and it lands on the board. But it's really, this is really futuristic in a way. So that's what I wanted to give some examples of interaction design. Then the question is, how would you teach interaction design? This has been my timeline. I'm not sure how visible that is, but essentially we had to start, partly because even though we had a year and a few months ahead of when students would actually be starting the program, which is this fall. So we started a year ago, June, with the kind of launch of the program. It takes a while in academia to get things going. Well, you have to recruit students. You have to put the message out there. So the reason we created the video and a lot of the materials and had to use some smoke and mirrors, and we didn't actually have pictures of real interaction design students, we had pictures of graphic design students and other students at CCA, is we had to get the kind of brand and message out first so that people knew that this was out there. So teachers knew, so parents knew, so students knew. And then last fall, which I'm going to talk about, is developing the curriculum. And then this spring, we've been working on getting faculty to teach the curriculum, mostly adjunct, people that have professions and careers on the side. And by the way, I do have a call for a part-time interaction design faculty with benefits. So if you know of anyone who is interested, it's up there on the CCA website. Admissions, admitting students, and we ran a pilot spring elective, which I'm going to show some of the work from. And then this fall, we're looking to develop relationships and sponsors. We're going to kick off the curriculum and start developing the community. So we really hope that this program can start to become a hub because we want to have very close ties to the Valley. And so in this way, that sort of timeline kind of represents this sort of onion diagram of putting the students at the center with a curriculum around that and faculty around that. And we had the amazing privilege of not having a legacy faculty that we actually had to work around. Now, that's pretty typical in academia. But here we're starting completely green. So we can put the curriculum out there and then find the faculty to teach that. So that's been a wonderful experience. And also using the design process that we teach on ourselves. So gathering wide input in a kind of divergence and then converging and then diverging and converging. So like, what is this interaction design? What could it be? What do we want to get out of it? What do the students look like? What are the needs? What are the demands? Having a smaller group try and make sense of all that, and then kind of looking around. So what are the courses that would fulfill those needs and demands, and putting a smaller group around that and trying to come up with the curriculum in a very design-oriented way. And so we had a number of events. Was anybody part of any of these events? Anybody in this room? Oh, I'm sorry that nobody's raising their hand. But we probably had at least 100 people from numerous companies, academia, Stanford, Berkeley, SF State, kind of coming and helping sort of figure out both what is interaction design and what is needed in the field, what are the skills that are needed. And we also have to look forward. Where's this profession going? Because our first class is going to be 2014, right? So a year ago, that felt like a long time away. Now it's feeling like less. But you know, where is this field going, and what is its essence, if you will? And so just some of the kind of participants and people that have been on the advisory board is like a lot of the companies that we know, and a lot of the companies that are actually leading by design and put interaction design forward. In fact, where CCA is located at the foot of Montreal Hill, there's a number of startups there now too. We're just around the corner from Zynga, which is growing at an incredible pace. You can tell because they want to rent our parking lot. And then there's a company like Airbnb, which it feels like a design-led kind of disruptive startup, is right around the corner too. So there's like kind of a culture that's happening in that part of San Francisco as well. And so one of the things found is talking to all these people, I bet this is something that you guys can relate to, is there's a lot of people out there that are calling themselves interaction designers, and they're coming from very different places. So it's like this amorphous cloud where I'm an interaction designer, and you start talking to them and say, hey, well, what's your education? How did you become an interaction designer? And a few people have MFAs from some of those places like Ivrea or CIID or ITP at NYU or IIT in Chicago or University of Washington Design. But a lot of people came from very different disciplines and found their way into this career. So you find people that come from very different materials, very different sort of heritage. Graphic designers are coming from this space of language and surface and coming in and saying, well, I'm really interested in how things change and move and mutate over time. And I'm an interaction designer, or what they call interactive designer. Generally, the only people I hear that use the term interactive designer are advertising and graphic design. Usually it refers to some kind of web component like Flash. Industrial designers are saying, hey, the screens are getting bigger on my stuff. You know, this radius now has to wrap a screen. I want to start designing that too. Like, I don't want to just be doing the backs and the sides. I want to do more of these objects. And the people coming in fine arts, the sort of interactive art, sculpture, film and animation, like storytelling. Animation has been a great background for a number of the best interaction designers that I've worked with. People coming from spatial background like architecture, of course, a lot of you, I bet, are coming from computer science, HCI sort of background, social science research, and of course liberal arts. So in addition to the social science research, there's the people who, I haven't heard of one in a while, but people that used to call themselves information architects, you know, out there. Is there someone? Yeah? Hey. You know, and coming from often, like a lot of people came from cartography that I knew. And trying to make sense of this. So what is it that brings these people together that call themselves interaction designer? And one thing I found is a kind of unique person who was phenomenally successful. And once I found them, I started to chase them down. And they were these people that, you have to kind of believe in unicorns for this story. They were these people who had an amazing set of skills, and I'll bet some of you folks know them, that they were inherently thinking about behaviors, thinking about how do things act and behave, and then they could kind of work on the other side of their brain and do an analytical decomposition of states and sort of do some kind of state transition. And then they sort of sit down and do the visual design on it and create something that's actually really quite beautiful and motivating. And then probably for reasons like Flash wasn't enough, or they couldn't do enough on just like a timeline or something, they started to program. And so these folks had these incredible combination of skills. And does anyone know anybody like this? who's sort of technical and they work both right and left brained? Yeah, okay, yeah. They're rare and they're incredibly successful, and they kind of do it all. And as soon as I started, and I found they had very different paths. Like this one fellow who used to work at IDEO, then worked at Apple in their lead product group, he was doing graphic art at the same time he was studying engineering. And it's like, wow. And then he was being paid to be a visual designer for websites and things while he was studying various forms of mechanical and computer science. And it's like, that's really interesting. And then, as I say, a number of people came from animation and film. And animation has this wonderful thing about the timeline. And as soon as you say, well, the timeline doesn't do what I need, then you have to kind of turn to code. And they have this visual ability. So having conversations, I was like, wow, this is interesting. This is really interesting. And things that I actually thought were opposed, like you're either a systemic or you're a visual designer. You know, there's the people who figure out what it is, and then there's the people who paint. Well, by the way, the people that paint hate that distinction. The people that paint. And it's gotten to the point where actually there's no such thing as the ugly wireframe anymore. Almost every interaction designer does visual design at the same time they're doing interaction design, as they're kind of figuring out the systemic structure. So this combination started to become a kind of core for what we were thinking was, gee, that's the future. And then sort of shopping that around, started going back to some of those people who were potential sponsors of the program, and they're like, yeah, those are different job recs for me. If you actually can find those people, I can never find those people. Or actually, we've got one guy, he's in the back room, but we don't tell anyone about him. That's a very valuable designer for me. So we realized we're onto something, right? Like if we can actually combine those things and figure out what that essence is, then we're actually potentially looking at the future and certainly a very valuable designer for now. Another big question that came up is interaction design a media or a method? And that's kind of a tough question in a way. At least I found it really provocative and interesting because there's all these, I don't know if you can see this, but there's these overlapping circles here that, you know, industrial design kind of owns the stuff material, and graphic design owns the surface and language, and architecture owns space. And so what does interaction own? And it's kind of like we borrow these materials from all these other disciplines, and there's some magic that happens here in this overlap. So when these guys get together with these guys, there's something really interesting that starts to happen. And I think the answer is both. My answer is both. My answer is it's a media and a method. And that if you actually try and identify what is that media, what is that material that designers think about material, what's the material I'm working with? It's all those things. And then what is it differentiates, for example, an interaction designer from a graphic designer? And oh wow, gosh, I'm really sorry about that. That's actually quite a nice picture on my screen, but it's all gray. But you know, actually the red shows through. So there's a building here, and there's a car here, and there's some other people there. And, the red is actually this time component. It's that actually the material, if you will, of interaction designers is time, and it's kind of invisible. It's this thing that you're figuring out what happens next. You know, if there's this stimulus, what's the response? And how do these things come together across, and how is somebody able to make sense over time? And so if you're thinking about time, and you know, in some ways that's kind of systemic and behavioral, then you also have to think about story. And that seemed to be the other thing that's really bringing it together. And how many people saw, I think it was a Fast Company article, this new Pixar ebook that came out? It's really kind of making waves. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of amazing. So it's like a real, you know, computer animation storyteller has made an ebook that's really special. And then, of course, with HTML5, weird, wild things are happening. You know, that I keep getting these links and I send them out to the chair of film, the chair of animation, the chair of graphic design, and fine arts, and saying this could have been any one of our students. It's really kind of amazing that those things are coming together in a new way. And of course, the film students are really interested in pushing linearity of narrative. So there's something about narrative that I actually hope interaction at CCA can start to be a core part of. and bringing that together in a new way. So one of the core parts of the curriculum is actually 3 or 4 courses on time, a time studio. There's a time studio on story, which can be storyboards, personas, actual narrative, how do you construct plot, character, genre. Another one on the craft of how do you actually animate, how do you create behaviors, probably largely flash or motion-based. And another one on play, and then probably a whole bunch of other ones. So that's one of the sort of cores of the program. The next question is, so, okay, if that's interaction design, what does that mean at CCA? CCA is California College of the Arts. It's been around for 100 years. It's always been part of progressive movements. It was started in the arts and crafts movement. And just to show you a few pictures, it's in this wonderful facility that was a Greyhound maintenance facility up until in the 80s, I think. It got renovated in the 90s. It's got this wonderful space, which, well, I'll let you leave it to your imagination what's not bleached out here. And, where it's the kind of way that in a big open space that you imagine an art school to be. It's got a lot of make facilities. They've got CNC and laser cutter and just about every kind of hand tool or power tool that you'd want to make stuff, so you can make just about anything. So what is that? What is interaction design then at CCA? So we're bringing this technology in. And we also created a poster that was going up in imagine it outside the counselor's office in the high school hallway. And so we developed this message of kind of collaborative and play and prototyping and the future in a way. I think these questions that we can't see here are like, who's going to reinvent how we listen to music? Who's going to reinvent the way we experience computers, and who's going to reinvent social networks? And the answer, of course, is you will. And it talks about and again, it was any kind of abstract definition of interaction design wasn't really playing very well with high school students. I'm sure you've all tried to write something down about what you do or what interaction designers do. And so we just turned to, remember the first time you held a PSP in your hands, or an iPhone, or a Wii, and just trying to turn to those examples and remember the fun and inspiration. Well, if you've got a passion for technology and design and everything from pixels to processes, then you might be you've got what it takes to be an interaction designer. It was kind of the Uncle Sam wants you sort of thing. And I already showed you the video, but we created that video from that. And fortunately had a lot of genuinely excited CCA students that we could talk about it. And here's our educational mission. So in its simplest form is, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this, is interaction design feels like it's being birthed in this century especially. And in a way, there's a new specialty emerging. There was this thing that's been happening traditionally of all these different people kind of coming into that cloud and calling themselves interaction designer. And there feels like a real potential to put some form around that and actually call it a new specialty. And it was interesting because this came out of a lot of questions from advisors to the program who were saying, breadth or depth? Breadth or depth, Kristian? You're talking about all these different skills. What is it going to be? Is it going to be broad or is it going to be deep? And I really didn't like that question. And I said, it's got to be both. And they said, no, you don't get both. You get breadth or you get depth. And so it really put me up against the wall. And I said, well, maybe it's something new that you just don't know because you can't recognize it because it's not there yet. And then as I started saying that, and I felt very defensive, some people started turning me towards the Bauhaus history, which was when industrial design kind of got birthed. And they didn't know what it was. And they assembled a faculty from different disciplines that said the students will integrate what we teach. We'll bring all these different folks together, and the students will emerge in this profession in a way that that won't actually look like us, and will be something different. So that's the big grand thing, and I don't think it's happening at CCA. I think it's happening around the world, or just at CCA. But that students will have a systemic and behavioral. These are the kind of the time core. They'll be able to do visual design enough to communicate their work and and we're a design school, we have a really great graphic design department. We have fantastic teachers in graphic design. We'll have an aesthetic developed that they can actually do visual design. And maybe this is the bigger challenge, enough technical skills, enough code skills to demonstrate their work. When I had the fantastic privilege of talking to the lead designer for iPhone and lead designer for Mac OS, and got like a 3-hour session about how do they work, what tools do they use, how do they think about things. And they said, yeah, we had to code, we just had to learn code. In fact, they said that, I think they still had Director running somewhere, and that they could take that code, like once they got something, like the lights blinked just the way they wanted, or the thing moved just the way they wanted, or it had the character and personality, and it gets back to kind of genre that they were trying to express, that they would lock that code and give it to the engineers who could then turn it into actually the hard code quite simply, because it would have all the right variables and structure to sort of display that behavior. So that feels very important. Now, I don't think we're going to be producing engineers. In fact, I'm sure of it. But I'm hoping that students will have enough savvy around not just code and programming, but also physics and maybe some electronics, because electronics are becoming much more important to interaction with things like processing, opening up amazing abilities to somebody without a lot of skill. And so this is something that I was kind of debating whether to show this or not, but it's sort of a framework I developed that doesn't really match the years and it doesn't really match courses, but it is a kind of response to, like, is this a trade school? And it feels like it's not. Like, as I was saying, CCA is a school that has been following a lot of progressive movements, including like counterculture movements and liberation movements of the 70s and 80s, and that at its core, and there is a humanities and science, really strong humanities and sciences division at CCA, that there needed to be perspective and purpose, so that the students that are going through this program actually have a sense for history, and we're going to be teaching a history of interaction design this fall, and where they want it to go. And in fact, that history class is going to have futurism as the last sort of month of it. Where do you want to actually take this work and craft? And then methods and process, sort of training the mind, if you will. Things like brainstorming and collaboration and prototyping are core. And craft and making, which is probably where students spend most of their time, and where they should spend most of their time at an art design school. These are studio classes, for the most part, of about 16 students. And often, whether 6 hours a week, 6 contact hours a week, which is quite a lot. And a lot of it is making. It's making together. One of the core things of teaching a studio class at CCA is something called demonstrations, which actually I didn't go to design school. I went to engineering school. I had to kind of learn about because it was pretty fascinating. It's basically where a craftsperson will come in and demonstrate. This is how you throw a pot. This is how you blow glass. This is how you make a wireframe. This is how you create a storyboard. This kind of skill set. So very, very hands-on. So where are we now? As I was saying, we ran this elective, which is really oriented towards freshmen, and the goal there is to get people to be able to explain interaction design to their grandmothers and to get excited about interaction design, and hopefully choose that as their major. And now I just want to show a little bit of the student work leading up to a final project, which I think was pretty exciting. So this was just this last spring. The first assignment we did was in the real world. It says start with a cube. And I got this assignment from a guy named Dan Saffer, who got it from a guy named Mark Reddick, who is one of the founders of the design program at CMU. Start with a cube, and then do anything you want with it, as long as it started with like a 6-inch cube, I think we said. And make it so that, and this was an in-class assignment, so it wants to be rubbed. I think it was actually turned instead of twist. Grab and squeezed. And so students were really creative. This was the idea, is can we get into that moment of contact? Can we actually get into that point where there's a stimulus and there's a response, and actually get students to start there? And then we moved out to UI and we moved out to UX, and looking quite broadly. So I chose that sort of scale to look at. So this student did something really interesting. He cut the cube up into slices and put them together with a string, and then he wrote it a twisted tale, once upon a time. and then you sort of open it up and it reveals the story. So that's how we got the turn twist. And then because it has these different layers, it was kind of nice to thumb through and then squeeze. So it's like the students got it so quickly. Here was another example. Our student created a maze. So you have to turn it around to create, and somebody else. And this was just like whatever materials are at hand. I don't even think we brought anything in. Someone created a character. So I was really excited at this point because it felt like, oh, people are getting it. Because all of these things were things you wanted to pick up and play with. And then I was like, oh, of course, they're design students. And then we did an assignment where we went down to BART. We were in Rockridge for this. CCA has 2 campuses. One's in Oakland and one's in San Francisco. This particular class was taught for the first years who were in Oakland. And then our program is actually based in San Francisco. I went down, looked at the BART, and interviewed a few people, and came back and said, redesign it. It has to do 3 things. Go to a destination, refill my card and buy a card. And it wasn't hard, right? That's not a hard assignment to get your teeth in, because almost anything would be better. And a lot of these students have graphic design already. So they know how to make this they know how to do the pixels. And this actually has nicer colors than here. They're actually the kind of BART blue. And did nice stuff and got it. And then also thinking this way. And this was probably the biggest difference for the graphic design group, right? Never thought this way before about how something changes over time. You print it and that's it. And then did storyboards. This was for, that's too bad, alarm clock. And then played around with electronics, did a couple studio sessions on making stuff and using, I think in this case we used Max. Let's see if I can click on this. And just how easy it is now to make something do this. There was a little light sensor. I think they got a light sensor, LED, and connection to Max where they could sort of output video from the web. And other students did kind of crazy things. And it's like, remember, it's just wonderfully creative art students. We did a mobile assignment. So this is just sort of different canvases people were working on. This was a system to pass events through. So again, like designing for the iPhone comes naturally. And then we went to Xeum. Do folks know Xeum? It's sort of in a transition right now. It's this interactive museum in San Francisco. And I think it's changing its name to like the Children's Museum of San Francisco or something like that. But we went there and they were interested in exploring, CCA has a wonderful program called Engage, where nonprofits reach out and CCA reaches back and we design courses or projects around the challenges these nonprofits are facing. And Xeum wrote like 6 or 7 beautiful briefs that were like, can we redesign the entry-exit experience? Can we redesign the toddler exhibit? Can we redesign this? They had some kind of blue screen type thing. And so the students went there and we spent the day just kind of workshopping. So here we're teaching collaboration and prototyping and design thinking, and had the Xeum fellow folks as clients to kind of come in and give reviews, and they were just wonderful. And also getting out. So this was sort of thinking about some non-screen experiences as well, as like how you could apply that sense of user experience and interaction design to non-screen, leading up to the final project, which was redesigning the airline user experience, which is, I'm not the first one to have assigned this one. And of course, this is another thing that is really approachable because it can be really atrocious. And almost everyone's done it. So it felt like a pretty good assignment. And we broke the students, there were 16 students, broke them up into 4 teams of 4, and gave each one a fake airline brand. One of them was $1 Air, we get you there in one piece for cheap. Another was Holiday, all for fun and all for sun. Familiar, you and your kin pile in. So they had this sort of brand, and the company said in its brief, our engineers and our business guys have optimized and coded everything that can possibly be done, and now we're kind of interested in what this design thing is. So tell us what the possibilities are. And so the students spent about 4 weeks, and we also did a nice experiment where each of those 4 teams had a coach from industry. So I don't know if you guys know Method Design, but it's a really fantastic design firm in San Francisco, and they gave us about 3 coaches, and then there was another couple of coaches from startups. And so they had like professional interaction designers kind of coaching them, and they met with them twice, and they did Skype, and they also learned how to use Basecamp and all that kind of thing. So they're really like working in the stuff. And then in the final, we had these judges who were, this is David Cronin from Smart Design, and Danny Stillian from IDEO, and Maria Giudice, who's the CEO of Hot Studio, and behind here is Sean Townsend, who's the head of Google Research, and sort of judging these things. And the students had to show a video and do a physical prototype presentation, and they had to show their kind of flows, if you will, their sort of specifications for the kiosk and whatever. And the assignment was, I think we together generated maybe 20 touch points that could be in the airline experience, including the kiosk and the boarding sign and the web and the ticket and everything else. And that they chose 3 of those. One of them had to be the check-in experience to then present back. And they did an amazing job. So I'm going to just play one of those videos. And if you want, I'll play 2.
Aiden's just received an email from his friends saying that they want to go on an adventure next weekend. Where could he go find something quick, inexpensive, and exciting?
You know what? I'm sorry. I wanted to just set this up a little bit because I think it would be more fair to the students. This was $1 Air. We get you there in one piece for cheap. And it was funny because this was the last chosen one. Like we draw straws or something, and the students chose their airline. The luxury one went first, and then the guys who got this one thought it really sucked, but these are the guys who actually won the competition, if you will, which was a t-shirt that said first place. And the others said award winner. So they did a really interesting thing, is they came up with like, okay, they've already become as cheap as possible. They said their business guys and engineers got together and streamlined everything, so what else can we do? And they said, who's our customer? And they kind of went into this idea of a young person who's budget-minded and actually is looking for adventures. So they kind of, that race to the bottom, they sort of took that and sort of put it in a new direction. So I just wanted to frame that a little bit, because then I think it helps make it make more sense. And we capped the videos at 3 minutes, so it feels a little rushed, but I hope it speaks for itself.
Aiden's just received an email from his friends saying that they want to go on an adventure next weekend. Where could he go find something quick, inexpensive, and exciting? Answer, $1 Air. He zips over to the website and logs in. $1 Air uses Facebook to pull his interests and his friends' information to give him adventure recommendations tailored specifically to him. But it's one of the featured packages of the week that catches his eye, learning parkour in New York. As part of this bundle, Aiden and his friends would get their transportation taken care of by Zipcar, their lodging squared away by Airbnb, and they even get passes to a parkour lesson. He goes for it. Aiden gets to choose what zone of the plane he'd like to sit in, because $1 Air offers 2 options, one with the mood being social and exciting, and the other a little bit more chill and quiet. He picks social! To make introductions with his seating partner less awkward, $1 Air even asks a random icebreaker question for later use. Once he's signed up, he sends an invite out to all of his buddies. The best part is, the more that join, the bigger the discount off their airfare. As his buddies join in, Aiden can track their progress on their way to the epic 30% off. It's the big day of the trip. From the mobile app, Aiden can check into all of the services that make up his adventure package, including Zipcar and Airbnb. He can view his itinerary, see his friends on board, make changes, and get info about the flight. Aiden chooses Flight Info, which tells him everything he needs to know. Not only is his phone good for getting info, he can also use it to check in at the terminal and board his flight. On the go, he can even browse other adventures for later on the mobile adventure shop. After check-in, he stops by a way station to drop off his bags. He places his bag on the bottom portion, which scans the $1 Air bag dongle he received when he became a member. The dongle is a personalized RFID tag that's synced to all of his info to make baggage drop-off quick and easy. He confirms his price on the screen up top and puts his bags into his chute. Set it and forget it. Next, Aiden uses his app to board and he's ready to take off. Once in the air, the app transforms into the center of his entertainment experience. Our ergo-economic seats allow for charging and mounting of his smartphone. That way, we can pass along the savings of not installing screens to our customers and offer things like free onboard Wi-Fi. Once connected, he can watch movies or listen to music, not only from his own content, but also from anyone else who's enabled sharing on their devices, a feature we call AirHive. He can also ask the Hive, aka other people on the plane, questions. He decides to ask people from New York where he can find good ramen in the Lower East Side. Other people see his question in their ticker, and he's soon flooded with helpful suggestions. The rest of the adventure is seamless, with all of the logistics taken care of through $1's website and mobile app. What could have been a weekend at home turned into an unforgettable adventure, traveling to new places and trying new things. Adventures can be a way of life. Imagine, seek, experience. $1.
So the interesting thing to note there is these are freshmen. These, for the most part, like the bulk of the class was people 18, 19 years old. Actually, there's a couple 17-year-olds who just kind of grew up with this kind of design around them, and it was really impressive. It was hard to actually choose a winner because they were all really good. I think I'm going to skip the next video, send you guys to the website, and wrap up for questions. So, as I said, this was kind of the timeline. I hope we'll also, as seniors, so it'll be a couple years till we have seniors and they're doing their thesis, but we hope that in the senior year they'll actually be looking at the evolution of interaction design and the edge, so things like government and healthcare and education. Like, I hope schools stop looking like this with their computers. And it's kind of a wide solicitation for teachers and mentors and reviewers. If you're interested, send a note to IXD at cca.edu. And the URL down at the bottom, cca.edu/interaction, it'll bring you to our homepage. And on the right side, there's like a ticker of some articles, and one of them is something like Debut Interaction Design Course Takes Flight. And in that, you can read about the student work, and there's links to the 4 videos, which are, the other 3 are equally impressive. So I think I'll kind of end it there for questions.
I'll run around with the microphone.
Thank you.
So if you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll bring you a mic.
I'm a very practical person, so this is a new program. Are there jobs that support the program when the kids graduate? Like, are there jobs out there for this skill set?
Absolutely.
Okay, a lot of them?
Yes.
I'm not trying to ask a dumb question. I'm very serious.
No, seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, I get this question, of course, from parents and teachers. So, you could go to Course 77 and look at all the jobs. You go to ixda.org and look at their job board. Actually, I think those have merged now. But, it used to be 4 or 5 years ago, there was a couple jobs a day, and now there's tens, if not hundreds on some days. So yeah, there's a lot of jobs out there for interaction designers. And the other people I get the question from is graphic designers. There's a lot of graphic designers out there. And I went and did a talk at the AIGA, and almost all of them are trying to figure out how to get into interaction, or what they call interactive. Yeah, there's, in fact, a couple people came up to me saying, are any of your students looking for jobs?
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm actually a master's student looking for a job, so you can talk to me after. But I'm wondering, there are all these master's programs, you said, and there aren't that many undergrad programs, and they're trying to, you see them squeezing a lot of curriculum in 1 to 2 years. So I'm wondering, what do you think will happen to the future of master's programs when you have 4 years to practice basically almost the same kind of curriculum in an undergrad program?
That's a really good question. So you really have 3 years. The first year is common between all the architecture, design, fine arts, where it's about core skills. They call it 1D, 2D, 3D, 4D, so color and texture and all that sort of thing. And then, of course, there's humanities and sciences running throughout. So if most of you probably have bachelors. Remember back to that education where 3 of your 5 classes are your major and another 2 are humanities and sciences or electives. So there's 3 years of those 3 classes, which is a little less intense than the graduate program, so it's stretched out. What I think will happen graduate programs are always operating at a different kind of level. Like they start at the evolution of the field for the most part, because that would be the intention of a master's. I think as there's more undergraduate interaction programs, it will push the graduate program to explore the edge more. And the undergraduates will become more about craft and the basics. And then you see things emerging like service design. Like there's a number of people putting service design out as its own separate field. So it wouldn't surprise me if you start to see some interaction master's programs focusing on service design or even organization design or something like that.
So I'd like to follow up on the first question. Could you be a bit more specific about where these kids with an undergrad in interaction design will find the job? I work for a larger company, so it may be a little bit skewed, but sort of a very concrete example. I had an intern last summer. He had an undergrad in HCI, and it seems like everyone, or at least everyone where he applies, is asking for people with a lot of experience, with people with grad degrees. So I'm wondering if you could be a bit more specific about who said that they would hire your students.
Oh, gosh. Well, I can say that 4 or 5 of the students showed their work from this class as their portfolio, and they got hired immediately. But they work cheap. They work for $15, $20 an hour. So, my God. I mean, I'm trying to think of who didn't. But I mean, just an example, like Google said they wanted a lot of these kind of, and it goes back to that thing. It's like, if you show me a student who can do systemic and behavioral design and visual design and do a little bit of coding, or at least understand technology, and has already practiced at collaboration and prototyping, and knows something about professional deliverables, like, oh my God, that's sold, right? This is recorded and stuff, but Facebook was so interested, they said they wouldn't let them return after their internship, which scared me a little bit. And then I realized that their founder didn't finish, so that kind of made sense. But those kind of companies are the ones that are really interested. I mean, companies that are design-led. Adobe is around the corner, they're very interested. And actually, Adobe has a hard time attracting high-quality designers at the moment. So they're, again, this is the bane of being recorded, but Adobe's a fantastic organization with fantastic tools that is going to be putting out the next generation of something and creates the way we create.
Eric from France, do you have anything related to emotional design?
It's in there. It's definitely in there in that Time Studio 2, which is about behavior and that sort of thing, which has, as a part of it, emotional design. But actually, my first response was, I'm working on designing a kind of cognitive science for designers class. I don't know what to call it yet. And I had the good fortune of one of my colleagues at IDEO is Don Norman. So we sat down and thought about what would be a good cognitive science for designers, and it was really inspiring, actually. So I think that'll also address that issue. And the short part of that is, I remember I showed Don this list of all the things that should probably be in a cognitive science class. He said, yeah, that's the list, and it'll bore everyone to tears. And then said, well, you should do it like task-based, which made total sense. And if you think about like the hospital, where if something goes wrong, what happens when something goes wrong in a hospital, like in a surgical theater? I think somebody said it. An alarm goes off, right? And then what happens if 3 things go wrong? lots of alarms go off, which is probably not the way to design it. But then you could actually get into, that's not actually getting to emotional design, but definitely the cognitive science, things like channels and what is the capacity of a human to attend and things like that. I wonder if I'm punting on your question. I feel like emotional design is so core almost to a designer already that it's there. It's there. Yeah.
In France, some people talk. In France, I am not from your community. I am a computer scientist, and I was very curious to come there to know about what is going on. But sometimes I meet people from design and interaction design, and some of them begin to speak about emotional design. So it's related about what you said, but it's maybe a new way to design applications also, to take into account emotions, to use sensors and things like that. So you mixed with augmented reality stuff and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very curious. I think that you have new ways to interact with emotions, and for example, when you use, I'm sorry, my English is very bad, smart textiles, does it mean something? Yeah. Clothes, smart clothes, and so wearable things and stuff like that. So you have different feelings with your environment, and so you can appeal new way of being in a room or in a place or interacting with a city or something like that. It refers to smart cities, for example. You can make buildings alive. Mm-hmm. So it's one of the reasons I am here and to find people to work with in France. So, for example, I don't know if anybody is working around smart textiles in the valley. Doesn't think so. I don't think so, but I am not sure. No. Well, everybody is working on the cloud, maybe. Much money is going on the cloud, but I think there is more interesting things like Internet of Things that can bring more imagination and more employees and employment. Yeah. So it's my point of view.
So I actually had a couple more things that I think I didn't say, but remember that flower diagram with all the different disciplines around it and the materials. Because of that, we allowed 4 open classes for interaction students to do multidisciplinary work with other disciplines. And I had to go around to all the other different chairs and ask them to basically open up one slot in their program so that we could actually have things. So fashion is one where we hope to have a co-class. Another, of course, is architecture. But the things you just talked about are all perfect interdisciplinary studio classes where you get architects and fashion and interaction students together. And that's where I say the magic happens. And I feel like I can use the word magic because I went to engineering school for a long time. But, and it is, and I know it is magic. That, that those kind of things are exactly the sort of things that we want to explore. And in fact, for the stuff you were talking about, buildings and skins and interactivity, there's something at CCA called biodynamic structures that's happening, if not this week, next week, that you might want to look up. It's run with the AA of London, so there's a big kind of architectural institution that's supporting this, and they're going to take the whole nave of CCA and be making large structures. And there's a professor at CCA, Jason Johnson, who's kind of talks about living in robots, that essentially buildings are big robots now. Yeah. So it's a really interesting thing. You might want to check it out.
We've got 2 more questions.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm John Emerson from Healthline, and we are actively hiring interactive designers who want to work on building consumer health and helping people live healthier lives. So that's, excuse the pitch. But I actually have 2 mini questions. One is a follow-on to the employment question, which is one more of, at IDEO, we hire an IDEO to redesign an entire user experience for something like an airline or something like that. To what extent are firms looking for bigger things like service experience, or would someone come out of your program and go into something that's really sort of these major overhaul type experience programs versus, sort of your garden variety interactive design? That's one question that I just want to ask first. I'm wondering if there's an appetite or openness for bigger projects, for younger people?
Gosh, I don't know. I can't really speak to the scale and size. I mean, again, thanks to Steve Jobs, a lot of companies are trying to figure out what this magic thing is that is design, essentially. And I've used magic in 2 different contexts there. This special thing of design, and starting to build design departments and realizing that they need to empower them more, and not just a bunch of pairs of hands that we call when we want to paint the pixels. So that's happening more and more, certainly. And I don't even, almost any company you could say, are they building a hot design team, or are they building an innovation team, or something like that? And it seems like the answer is yes. And I think more and more design firms are working with companies that want to get there, saying, like, you have to kind of build the organization to follow that.
And a second question, I'm just curious. I had a friend who was actually working on airport security for the government a long time ago, and maybe not too long ago, and actually went to IDEO. And I'm wondering if you had any of those ideas. When I saw this airline experience design, it totally made me think of my friend's project. So I'd be curious offline to hear if you were there during that time, because it was a very interesting project.
I'm not sure which project, like the TSA project?
TSA, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I was there during that. I mean, certainly the students came up with their own stuff independently. Yeah.
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 Okay. I think we're going to have to hold on the rest, and you can communicate with Kristian through email, voice, and carrier pigeon. Thank you very much for coming.
I'm happy to be here. It's a real pleasure to be back in the CHI community, so appreciate it.